The warships came out of the darkness between stars like a swarm of metal insects. There were 300 of them, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their hulls were black and smooth, covered in weapons that could turn cities into glass. High Commander stood on the bridge of the largest ship and looked at the blue planet on his screen. He had conquered 17 star systems. He had broken civilizations that were ancient when his species was still crawling in mud. This small world with its primitive rockets and simple satellites would be easy. His officers had already completed their scans. Earth had 7 billion people living on it. They had nuclear weapons, which was amusing. They had chemical rockets that could barely reach their own moon. They had no shields, no plasma cannons, no faster-than-light drives. By every measure that mattered, they were children playing with sticks while adults carried guns. Gave the order to begin. His ships moved into position around the planet. The first wave of attacks was precise and clean. Military bases vanished in columns of white fire. Satellite networks went dark. The primitive space stations broke apart and fell burning through the atmosphere. Watched the humans scramble their jets and launch their missiles, and he felt something close to pity. Their weapons bounced off shields like rain off stone. The whole thing took 6 hours. When it was done, every major military installation on Earth was destroyed. Every government building was rubble. Every leader who tried to organize resistance was dead. Broadcast his message to the planet in every human language his computers could translate. The message was simple: surrender, accept rule, provide workers and resources. In exchange, the killing would stop. He waited for the response that always came. On every world he had conquered, the pattern was the same. The leaders would argue among themselves. Some would want to fight. Most would want to live. Eventually, someone with authority would contact him, and the negotiations would begin. The terms were never good for the conquered, but they were better than death. Every species understood this. But Earth was silent. Waited one day, then two. His communications officers scanned every frequency. They found chaos. They found crying. They found prayers in 1,000 languages, but they did not find surrender. They did not find anyone trying to negotiate. Instead, they found something that made scales itch with confusion. The humans were not giving up. They were organizing. Reports came in from his surveillance drones. In the ruins of their cities, humans were pulling weapons from the rubble. Soldiers who had survived the attacks were not laying down their arms. They were disappearing into forests, mountains, and underground tunnels. Civilians were joining them. Old men, young women, children old enough to carry a gun. Even stranger, the human governments were dissolving on purpose. Presidents and prime ministers were not surrendering because they were giving away their power. They were breaking their nations into thousands of small pieces, each one led by local commanders who answered to no one. There was no head to cut off. There was no leader to threaten. The humans had looked at its overwhelming force and decided that the best response was to become impossible to find. Called a meeting of his senior officers. The mood was tense. They had expected to be celebrating by now. Instead, they were looking at reports of weapons disappearing, food supplies being hidden, and communication networks going dark as humans switched to methods that could not track. "They are being foolish," one officer said. "They cannot win. Their military is destroyed. Their infrastructure is burning. All they are doing is delaying the end." "Perhaps," another officer replied, "but delay costs us resources. Every day we spend in orbit is a day we are not conquering other worlds. The Dominion Council expects results." Silenced them with a gesture. He had not become High Commander by ignoring problems. He studied the data again, looking for patterns. What he found disturbed him. The humans were not acting like a species that had been defeated. They were acting like a species that was preparing for a long war. He made his decision. If the humans would not surrender from orbit, he would take their world by force. He ordered 30,000 ground troops to prepare for deployment. They would secure the major cities first, then spread out to crush any resistance. It was inefficient and ugly, but it would work. No species could resist the forever. The landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. They touched down in the ruins of cities called New York, London, Beijing, and Moscow. Soldiers marched out in perfect formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. They expected to find survivors cowering in basements, waiting to be conquered. The cities were empty. Not abandoned. They could see signs of recent activity everywhere. Cooking fire still warm, footprints in the dust, messages painted on walls in languages the translators could not decode, but the people were gone. 7 billion humans had looked at the army and simply vanished. Received the reports with growing unease. His troops spread out through the empty streets, searching buildings, scanning underground spaces. They found tunnels that went on for miles. They found supply caches hidden in walls. They found traps that killed soldiers who opened the wrong doors. On the third day, the attacks began. They came from nowhere. A sniper shot from a building that sensors said was empty. An explosion that killed a patrol and left no evidence of who planted it. An officer found dead in his quarters with a human knife in his throat, though no human had entered the base. Realized, slowly and with horror, that he had made a terrible mistake. He had thought destroying the human military meant destroying human resistance. He had thought breaking their governments meant breaking their will. He had thought this world was like every other world he had conquered. He was wrong. The humans had not lost. They had not surrendered. They had not broken. They had simply changed the nature of the war. They had stopped being a civilization that could be conquered and become something else entirely. They had become a planet that fought back. And standing on his ship high above the burning world, finally understood the truth that would haunt them for generations. He had not won a war, he had walked into one, and the humans were just getting started. Lieutenant had been a soldier for 12 years. She had fought on 6 different worlds and seen things that would give most beings nightmares. But nothing in her training had prepared her for Earth. Nothing had prepared her for the humans. Her patrol moved through the ruins of a city the humans called Chicago. The buildings here had been beautiful once, tall towers of glass and steel that reached toward the sky. Now they were broken skeletons, their windows shattered, their walls covered in strange symbols that her translator could not read. The streets were empty, but a knew better than to believe they were safe. Nothing on this planet was safe. Movement, one of her soldiers whispered. 3rd floor, northwest building. Raised her weapon and scanned the area. Her sensors showed nothing. They always showed nothing. The humans had learned to hide from technology in the first weeks of the war. They wrapped themselves in materials that blocked heat signatures. They moved through tunnels that went deeper than any scan could reach. They attacked and disappeared like ghosts. Hold position, ordered. Wait for confirmation. They waited. The wind blew through the empty streets carrying dust and the smell of smoke. Somewhere in the distance an explosion echoed. Another patrol finding another trap. I had stopped counting the dead. There were too many. The attack came from below. The ground opened up beneath 2 of her soldiers. They fell screaming into a pit lined with sharpened metal. Before it could react, gunfire erupted from 3 different directions. Human weapons were primitive, simple projectiles pushed by chemical explosions, but they worked. They punched through armor at close range. They killed. Dove for cover and returned fire. She saw shapes moving in the ruins, fast and low. Humans. They were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She hit one, watched it fall, but 2 more took its place. Her soldiers were dying around her. She called for backup, but the response was static. The humans had learned to jam their communications too. The fight lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, 8 of her 12 soldiers were dead. The humans had vanished back into their tunnels, taking their wounded with them. They left nothing behind except shell casings and blood. Sat in the rubble and tried to understand what had just happened. She was a trained soldier with advanced weapons and armor. The humans were using guns that were centuries old, wearing clothes instead of armor, fighting with tools they had made themselves. And they were winning. She thought about the reports she had read. They had killed millions of humans in the first days of the invasion. They had destroyed cities, armies, governments. By every measure that mattered, the humans should have been broken. Instead, they fought harder. There was a word in the human languages that her translator struggled with: guerrilla. It meant little war, but there was nothing little about what the humans were doing. They had turned their entire planet into a weapon. Every street was a potential ambush. Every building was a potential trap. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, was a potential soldier. A returned to base and filed her report. She wrote about the attack, the casualties, the tactics the humans had used. She wrote about what she had observed over the past months. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They did not follow rules of war. They did not wear uniforms or march in formation. They fought like something else entirely. They fought like animals defending their den. Her commander read the report and deleted it. "We do not need analysis," he said. "We need results. Tomorrow you will lead a larger patrol. You will find the human fighters and destroy them." I wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that larger patrols just meant more targets. The humans did not stand and fight. They attacked weak points and disappeared. They let the search for days, then struck when guards were tired and attention was low. They were patient in a way that no species they had ever encountered was patient. But she said nothing. Orders were orders. The next day she led 50 soldiers into the city. They moved carefully, checking every corner, scanning every building. They found signs of human activity everywhere: footprints in the dust, cooking fire still warm, messages painted on walls. Then they found the hospital. It was a large building on the edge of the city, mostly intact. The humans had been using it as a base. I could see movement inside, shapes behind the broken windows. She ordered her soldiers to surround the building. They would go in from all sides, trap the humans, and end this cell of resistance once and for all. They breached the doors and moved inside. The hallways were dark and quiet. Medical equipment lay scattered on the floor. There were beds lined up against the walls, but they were empty. The humans had been here recently. I could smell them. They found the first body on the second floor. A human, dead for hours with a wound in its chest. Then another, and another. The humans had been fighting among themselves, or so it seemed. Then I saw the wires. They ran along the walls, thin and almost invisible, connecting to packages hidden behind equipment and under beds. She understood what she was looking at just before the world turned white. The explosion killed 30 of her soldiers instantly. The building collapsed on top of them, burying the rest. I survived only because she had been standing near a stairwell. She crawled out of the rubble hours later, bleeding and broken, to find human fighters waiting. They did not kill her. They bandaged her wounds, gave her water, and asked her questions in broken. When she refused to answer, they did not torture her. They simply waited. One of them, an old female with gray hair and kind eyes, sat beside her and talked. "We do not want this war," the human said. "We did not ask for you to come. We did not threaten you. We were living our lives, raising our children, dreaming our dreams, and you came and burned everything." I said nothing. "You think we are monsters," the human continued. "You think we are cruel because we fight the way we fight. But what choice did you give us? You have ships and weapons we cannot match. You have technology we do not understand. The only thing we have is our willingness to die for our home, so that is what we use." She leaned closer, and her kind eyes turned hard. "We will not stop. We cannot stop. Every human on this planet knows that surrender means death, not for us, but for everything we are. Our children will grow up in your minds. Our culture will disappear. Our species will become slaves. So we fight. We fight with everything we have. We fight even when we know we will die, because dying free is better than living as nothing." They released the next morning. They gave her a message to take back to her commanders. It was simple. Leave our world, or we will make you pay for every day you stay. Delivered the message. Her commanders laughed and ordered another assault. 300 humans died in the attack. That night, every base on the continent lost power at the same moment. In the darkness that followed, human fighters struck. By morning, 1,000 soldiers were dead. The humans had delivered their own message. And unlike they always kept their promises. High Commander had stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the reports, the numbers, the faces of soldiers who had gone down to the planet and never come back. In 6 months of occupation, he had lost more troops than in his previous 17 conquests combined, and the humans showed no signs of stopping. He stood in his command center and watched the feeds from the planet below. Fires burned in a dozen cities. His soldiers patrolled streets that might explode at any moment. Supply convoys disappeared between checkpoints. Officers were found dead in locked rooms with no sign of how the killers had entered or escaped. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They struck without warning and vanished without trace. They used weapons made from scrap metal and chemicals found in their homes. They turned everyday objects into instruments of death. A vehicle could be a bomb. A child could be a messenger. An old man sitting quietly on a corner could be counting soldiers and reporting their movements to fighters hidden in the ruins. Had tried everything. He had increased patrols. The humans attacked the gaps between them. He had fortified bases. The humans tunneled underneath and planted explosives. He had taken hostages. The humans rescued some and mourned the rest, but they never stopped fighting. His scientists had studied the humans extensively. They had examined captured fighters, analyzed their biology, tried to understand what made them so difficult to break. The reports were disturbing. Humans were physically weak compared to most species. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. They could not see in the dark or hear sounds beyond a narrow range. They needed to sleep for hours every day and could die from simple changes in temperature. By every measure, they should have been easy prey. But they had something else, something they had never encountered in this form. The scientists called it spite. Spite was a human concept that had no perfect translation in the language. It meant the willingness to harm yourself if it meant harming your enemy more. It meant choosing pain over surrender. It meant looking at certain death and smiling because your death would cost the enemy something precious. The humans were full of spite. It burned in them like a fire that could not be put out. They did not fight to win. They fought to make the pay. Every soldier killed was a victory. Every supply ship destroyed was a celebration. Every day the occupation continued was a day the humans had not been broken. Received a report that changed everything on a cold morning in the 7th month of the war. The orbital refineries were gone. He read the report 3 times before he believed it. The refineries were massive stations that hung in space above the planet, processing resources and fuel for the occupation fleet. They were protected by shields and weapons systems that nothing on Earth could penetrate. They were 100 miles above the surface, far beyond the reach of any human technology. And they were destroyed. The attack had come from the ocean, from submarines that the humans had sunk themselves in the first days of the war. They had hidden these vessels in the deepest parts of their seas, crewed by soldiers who lived in darkness for months, breathing recycled air, eating food that had long since lost its taste. They had waited for the moment when the refineries moved into the right position. Then they had surfaced and launched missiles that should not have been able to reach space. The missiles were not military weapons. They were modified versions of the rockets humans used to send objects into orbit. The humans had rebuilt them in secret, using parts scavenged from their destroyed space program. They had calculated the trajectory by hand because their computers had been destroyed. They had aimed for the one moment when the refineries were vulnerable. The submarines had been destroyed within seconds of surfacing. The crews knew they would die. They launched anyway, stared at the burning wreckage of his refineries, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time: fear. He called his senior officers together. The mood was grim. They had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. They had found something else entirely, a species that did not know how to surrender, a species that would rather burn with you than let you win. "We need to change our approach," one officer said. "More troops, heavier weapons, we can still break them." "Can we?" another replied. "We have killed millions of them. We have destroyed their cities, their governments, their armies, and they are still fighting. What will it take to stop them? Do we need to kill them all?" Silence fell over the room. The question hung in the air like smoke. Knew the answer, and it terrified him. Yes. To stop the humans, they would need to kill every single one of them. Men, women, children, everyone. The humans would not stop otherwise. They could not stop. This was not stubbornness or pride. This was something deeper, something woven into the very nature of their species. The humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had survived ice ages and plagues and predators and each other. They had built civilizations and watched them fall and built them again. They had split the atom and walked on their moon and dreamed of reaching the stars. And through all of it, they had never given up, never surrendered, never stopped fighting. This was what they were. This was what they had always been. A species forged in struggle, tempered by hardship, defined by an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Looked at his officers and saw the same fear in their eyes. They were not soldiers anymore. They were prey, trapped on a world with a predator they did not understand. "Send a message to the Dominion Council," said finally. "Request reinforcements, request additional supplies, and request guidance." He paused, tasting the next words before he spoke them. "Tell them we may have made a mistake." The message went out that day. The response came 3 weeks later. The Council was displeased. The Dominion did not make mistakes. The Dominion did not retreat, would complete his mission or face the consequences. He accepted the order without argument. He had known the response before he asked. The Dominion did not understand what was happening on Earth. They could not understand it. They had never faced anything like this. But understood now. He understood that this war would not end with victory. It would end with exhaustion. One side would eventually run out of resources, out of soldiers, out of will. And looking at the humans, at their spite and their patience and their absolute refusal to break, was no longer certain which side that would be. That night, another base exploded. 50 more soldiers died. And somewhere in the ruins of a human city, fighters gathered to plan their next attack. The war continued, and the humans smiled. 2 years had passed since the first came to Earth. 2 years of blood and fire and death. 2 years that had changed everything. Commander stood in the same place where had once stood, looking at the same blue planet on the same screens. Was gone now, recalled to face the Dominion Council for his failures. Was his replacement, the 5th commander, to hold this position. The others had been killed, captured, or broken by what they had seen below. Studied the maps and tried to understand his situation. The still controlled the skis. Their ships still orbited the planet, still carried weapons that could destroy cities. But on the ground, everything had changed. The occupation existed only in name. Forces held their bases and nothing else. Every step outside the walls meant risk. Every patrol was a gamble. Every day brought new casualties. The humans had learned everything about their enemy. They knew technology better than some soldiers did. They had captured weapons and learned to use them. They had taken apart equipment and built their own versions. They had turned the invaders' own tools against them. But worse than the attacks was the fear. Soldiers no longer wanted to fight. They had seen too much. They had watched friends die in ambushes. They had found bodies left as warnings. They had learned that nowhere was safe, that the humans could reach them anywhere, anytime. Decided to try something new. If force could not break the humans, perhaps words could. He broadcast a message across the planet offering peace. They would withdraw from the cities. They would stop the attacks. They would allow humans to govern themselves. In exchange, the humans would stop fighting and allow them to extract resources peacefully. The response came from a woman named Sarah. She had been a general in one of the human armies before the war. Now she was something more. The humans called her a leader, but that was not quite right. She did not command. She inspired. Fighters who had never met her would die for her without question. Her name was spoken like a prayer in the ruins of human cities. Her message was broadcast on every frequency that could detect. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who had seen everything and was no longer afraid of anything. "You want to negotiate," she said. "You want to make a deal. You come to our world, kill our people, burn our cities, and now you want to talk about peace. Let me explain something to you." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was harder. "We are not negotiating for survival. We are deciding whether to let you live. You have killed our children. You have made widows and orphans of millions. You have forced us to fight in our own streets, to bury our dead in mass graves, to watch everything we built turn to ash. And still we stand. Still we fight. Still we resist." Listen, his scales growing cold. "You want to know our terms. You do not get terms, you get a choice. Leave now, take your ships and your soldiers and go back to wherever you came from, and we will let you go. We will not follow. We will not seek revenge. We will rebuild our world and forget your names." Her voice dropped, becoming almost gentle. "But if you stay one more day, if you kill one more human, if you take one more thing that belongs to us, then I make you this promise. We will learn where you come from. We will build ships to reach you. It may take us years. It may take us generations, but we will come. And we will teach your children what you taught ours. We will show them that there is no safety anywhere from people with nothing left to lose." The message ended, sat in silence, processing what he had heard. His officers looked at him, waiting for orders. He had none to give. He sent a reply, carefully worded, explaining that the Dominion could not simply leave. Too many resources had been invested. Surely some arrangement could be made. They were reasonable beings. They did not want to continue this war any more than the humans did. His response came the next day. It was not words, it was action. A shuttle exploded in the docking bay of the orbital command ship. The blast killed 200 and damaged systems throughout the vessel. Emergency crews rushed to contain the fire while security teams searched for the source of the attack. They found it quickly. The shuttle had been carrying supplies from the surface. Hidden among the cargo was a human, a woman who had volunteered for a mission she knew would end in her death. She had assembled the bomb herself, piece by piece, using components smuggled past every security check. She had waited until the shuttle was docked, then triggered the explosion. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how she had gotten there. The investigation revealed that she had been captured months earlier. She had been a prisoner, working in a labor detail at a base. She had escaped, made contact with the resistance, and volunteered immediately. The code she used to access the shuttle had come from an officer who had been captured, questioned, and released. The officer did not remember giving up the codes. The humans had ways of extracting information that left no marks. Read the report and understood what had been telling him. This was not a bluff. The humans were not making empty threats. They had already penetrated every level of security. They had people everywhere, waiting for orders. They could strike anywhere at any time. He contacted the Dominion Council again. This time, his message was different. He did not ask for guidance. He did not request reinforcements. He stated facts. The war on Earth could not be won. Not without killing every human on the planet, and perhaps not even then. The occupation was costing more than it could ever gain. Every day, soldiers died for a world that did not want them. Every day, the humans grew stronger while they grew weaker. The council debated for 3 days. They had never retreated from a conquest. They had never admitted defeat. But the numbers did not lie. The cost of Earth was too high. The order came on a cold morning, transmitted through secure channels to every unit on and around the planet. Withdraw, pull back, leave this world to its people and never return. Broadcast the order to his troops. The response was immediate. Relief flooded through the ranks. Soldiers who had expected to die on this planet learned they would go home instead. Shuttles began landing to evacuate the bases. Ships moved into formation for the journey back to space. General watched from the surface. Her fighters stood beside her, weapons ready, waiting to see if this was a trick. But the ships began to move. They lifted away from the planet, rising through the atmosphere, joining the fleet in orbit. One by one, the great warships turned away from Earth. They accelerated, their engines glowing bright against the stars. They passed the orbit of the moon, then the outer planets, then the edge of the system itself. Did not celebrate. She did not smile. She simply watched until the last ship vanished into the darkness between stars. Then she turned to her people, the survivors of 2 years of hell, and spoke the words they had been waiting to hear. "They are gone, we won." The cheering started small and grew until it echoed across the planet. Humans emerged from bunkers and tunnels and ruins, looking up at a sky that was finally empty of enemy ships. They had paid a terrible price. Millions were dead. Cities were destroyed. The world they had known was gone forever. But they were free, they were alive, and they had proven something to the galaxy. Earth was not a world to be conquered. Humanity was not a species to be broken, and anyone who tried to take their home would learn the same lesson they had learned. Some prices are too high to pay. 50 years had passed since they left Earth. 50 years of rebuilding, growing, and reaching for the stars. Ambassador walked through the halls of the Galactic Forum, her scales gray with age but her mind as sharp as ever. She was the most famous alive, though not for reasons her people liked to remember. She was the survivor of Chicago, the soldier who had been captured by humans and released with a message, the officer who had written reports that no one wanted to read. Now she was a diplomat, sent to represent the Dominion at the most important meeting in its history. The humans were coming. The galaxy had watched Earth with interest after the war. The small blue world that had broken had become famous. Every spacefaring species knew the story. They had seen the recordings of human fighters emerging from rubble to attack armored soldiers. They had heard the accounts of submarines rising from the deep to destroy orbital stations. They had studied the tactics, the patience, the spite. And then they had watched the humans rebuild. It had taken them only 30 years to reach the stars. They had salvaged technology from the war and combined it with their own. They had built ships and colonized worlds and spread across a dozen systems. They were no longer the primitive species hiding in tunnels. They were a power. And today, for the first time, they were sending an official delegation to the Galactic Forum. I found her seat and waited. The chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. She recognized the tall, thin forms of the traders, the crystalline bodies of the silicates, the writhing masses of the collective. All of them had come to see the humans. The doors opened, and the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, wearing simple clothes that seemed almost humble compared to the elaborate costumes of other species. They walked with quiet confidence, neither aggressive nor afraid. At their head was a young man with dark hair and calm eyes. His name was James, and he was the great-grandson of the woman who had led Earth's resistance. I watched him approach the central platform. He looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. If she had not known what his species was capable of, she would have dismissed him entirely. But she knew she would never forget. The formal ceremonies took hours. Speeches were given in dozens of languages. Treaties were discussed. Trade agreements were proposed. Through all of it, the humans remained polite and patient, speaking softly and listening carefully. When the main session ended, approached the human delegation. She had rehearsed this moment for decades, ever since she first learned she would be here. The young ambassador saw her coming and waited, his expression friendly but unreadable. "Ambassador," said, "I am of the Dominion. I wanted to speak with you privately if you would allow it." James studied her for a moment. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or memory. "Lieutenant," he said, "the survivor of Chicago, my great-grandmother spoke of you." I felt her heart's beat faster. She remembered me. She remembered everyone. She said you were the first who tried to understand. He gestured to a quiet corner of the chamber. "Walk with me." They moved away from the crowds, finding a place where they could speak without being overheard. I gathered her thoughts, trying to find the right words for what she wanted to say. "I have spent 50 years thinking about your species," she began. "I have studied your history, your culture, your wars. I have tried to understand what makes you different from every other species we have encountered." James listened without interrupting. "There is a perception among the younger races," I continued. "Those who never saw the war, they think humans are soft, peaceful. They see you smiling and trading and talking about cooperation, and they think you are weak." "We prefer peace," James said. "We always have." "Yes," I nodded slowly. "That is what confuses them. They cannot understand how a species that prefers peace could fight the way you fought. They do not see the connection." "What connection is that?" I looked at him, at his calm face and steady eyes, and saw echoes of every human she had ever faced. "You do not fight like warriors," she said. "You do not think in battles or campaigns or even wars. You think like survivors, and survivors do not stop until the threat is gone, not defeated, not retreated, gone." James considered this for a long moment. Then he nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "That is fair," he said. "We have never really had a choice about that. Earth is the only home we have ever had, and we came from a world that tried to kill us every day. Whether predators disease each other, we survived all of it. We are still here." He paused, looking out at the crowded chamber, at the hundreds of species who had come to see the humans take their place among the stars. "When someone asks what makes us different, what makes us fight the way we do, I tell them the same thing." He met A's eyes. "Practice." I felt a chill run through her, the same chill she had felt 50 years ago in the ruins of Chicago. The humans had not changed. They were still the same species that had refused to break, refused to surrender, refused to die quietly. They had simply found new ways to survive. "I hope," she said carefully, "that our peoples can move beyond old conflicts, that we can build something better together." "We hope the same," James replied. His voice was warm, his smile genuine. "We are not an aggressive species, Ambassador. We never wanted war with you, we just wanted our home. And if someone threatens it again—" The warmth did not leave his face, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something old and patient and utterly without mercy. "Then I suppose they will learn the same lesson you did." I nodded. She had known the answer before she asked, but she had needed to hear it. She had needed to confirm what she had always believed. "I will tell my people," she said. "I will make them understand. Humans are not soft. Humans are not weak. Humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of your weapons or your ships, but because of what you carry inside you. The will to survive, the refusal to break, the fire that burns even when everything else has turned to ash." James reached out and took her hand, the human gesture of friendship and respect. "Tell them something else," he said. "Tell them that we do not want to be dangerous. We want to build, to explore, to learn. We want to see what the galaxy holds and share what we have found. We want peace and prosperity and a future for our children." He squeezed her hand gently. "But also tell them that we remember. We remember every world that welcomed us and every world that threatened us. We remember kindness and cruelty alike, and we will respond to each in kind. He released her hand and stepped back, his smile returning. "It was good to meet you, Ambassador. I hope we will speak again." He returned to his delegation, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She watched him go, this young man who carried the legacy of his species in his eyes. Then she turned and walked back to her own people. She had a message to deliver, a warning to give, a story to tell. The story of a blue world that refused to fall, of a species that would not break, of a war that taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. No one defends their home like humans. Ask the aliens who tried. And across the galaxy, in species that had never seen Earth, the story spread. It passed from world to world, from generation to generation, becoming legend and then truth. The humans who smiled and traded and spoke of peace, and the fire that burned beneath their gentle words. Some worlds, the story said, are not worth conquering. Some species are not worth fighting. And some lessons once learned are never forgotten.